Hello there, Grateful Gang. It's Lauren here on Gratefully Living the Chronic Life. Thank you for joining us at this special time. We changed the time because my guest, who I'm totally geeking out over, I'm so excited to have Dr. Fuschia Sirois with us today from the University of Sheffield. She's in the UK, so 8 p.m. our time is like she's hopefully dead asleep at that time. But this time is well worth it, changing the time. And those of you that are watching the replay, you'll love it as well. She is the one of the world's leading researchers on gratitude, chronic pain. She's also doing a lot of work with procrastination, which is so interesting. So I can't wait to introduce her to you. But first, I was just with you guys 2 days ago. We actually, Fuschia and I picked this day because it coincides with World Gratitude Day, which was two days ago. I guess it was 2 days ago. Thank you for everybody who joined me on World Gratitude Day, and those who donated books and all and the prizes and all of that, for everybody, for Sandy Montgomery for being on, Dr. Bruce Singer for being on. It was a really special night. Those of you that won prizes, it's been a busy week, so I will make sure I get to it next week. So thank you again. It was a really special night. If you are having trouble logging in, so when you log in, if you're watching from inside my group, which is Attitude of Gratitude with Chronic Pain, because it's a private group, StreamYard, which is the platform that I use, they require permission to use your name and picture. Otherwise, you show up on my end as Facebook user, which isn't a big deal unless if you want your name to show up, it is a big deal. And if you want to be eligible for when I give away prizes. If you have trouble and you're not getting logged in or whatever, this streams in various places. It streams on the Attitude of Gratitude with Chronic Pain YouTube channel, on my public Facebook page, which is Lauren Zaleski, Gratitude Addict. So you can go to my website, gratitudeaddict.com. It actually streams there too. So there's a million well, not a million. There's like 6 other places you can watch it where you don't have to worry about the logging in factor. So I just wanted to put that out there. My episode next week was supposed to be Stephen Seiden from the amazing Facebook group Gratitude, and he's also an author. He has had to reschedule, so I will keep you guys posted as to what next week is. And real briefly, I don't want to take up much more time because I want to talk to Dr. Sirois. You guys are going to absolutely love what she has to share. I met a guardian angel yesterday, and her name is Deb. From, if you're watching, Deb, hi, from an app called Spot Hero. My daughter had invited me. She won a lottery and got last minute tickets to see a show on Broadway. And invited me. I think I was her third choice to ask, but whatever. I said yes. So I drove into New York City. I booked a spot through Spot Hero. Got there. The spot was full. Called Spot Hero. They changed it. Long story short, I tried like 8 different garages. I guess the city was crazy because the president is in the city for the UN, I guess. I'm not sure. I don't know why that's a public thing, but whatever. Up in the upper 80s, there's no garage to be found. This woman, Deb, stayed on the phone with me for 45 minutes. And she was so kind and nice. And it's just so hard to find customer service. And I didn't ask her to stay on. I was going to hang up. And she's like, no, I'm staying with you until you find a spot. So shout out to Deb. She actually joined the group. It turns out she has fibromyalgia. And she joined the group this morning. So thank you, Deb, for being my guardian angel yesterday. It meant a lot. And I know these are first world problems, but, when you're driving in New York City, if you've ever driven in New York City, it's a little crazy. So thank you, Deb. Without further ado, let me bring on our guest. Her name is Dr. Fuschia Sirois from the University of Sheffield in the UK. Thank you for being here, Dr. Sirois.
Oh, call me Fuschia, and thank you so much for inviting me, Lauren.
I'm totally geeking out over having her here. Whenever, those of us that are in the group, that have or who've been practicing gratitude for a while, who live with chronic conditions, we don't really need scientific proof that it works. We know that it works. But whenever I see an article that comes out that, has studies that are going on, I get super excited and I always share it. It's always Fuschia's name's usually attached to it, or Dr. Robert Emmons, but you're usually one of them. And gosh, it's such a thrill that you're here talking to us today, because I feel like, when you're in a room with a toddler who has 5,000 questions, That's how I feel. I don't even need an outline because I'm just going to be spouting things at you. So thank you so much. How did you, well, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you get involved in this work and this research?
I mean, with the gratitude research, it's more been, I guess, in the last few years. It wasn't initially. I had my initial interest in research was in health research, and specifically adjustment to chronic illness. So I sort of come from that perspective of how do people cope and adjust with chronic health conditions, including chronic pain and a variety of different conditions. Because it's like living with a chronic stressor, and that's something that it just erodes at you day after day after day. And it's the unpredictability and the uncertainty and the lack of control. And so, my early research when I was a graduate student, I was really interested in, perceived control. Like, how do you find control in those really low control situations where you're living with a chronic health condition? And so that's kind of where I started from, really researching people with arthritis and inflammatory bowel disease and later fibromyalgia.
Did you know somebody with any of those that made you want to research?
Actually, my PhD supervisor.
Oh, really?
Initially, and then as it turned out, I had an initial interest in this, and then I myself developed a chronic health condition, which people kind of think that, oh, well, that's why you got into it. It actually was the reverse. So it was kind of serendipitous that I was researching it, and then ended up, and had an interest in this area, and then ended up, experiencing it firsthand myself, which just, fueled the interest even more to kind of, go further with that line of inquiry.
Right.
But yeah, so it's all been about coping. And I think, early on, starting to hear about some of these positive psychology constructs like gratitude and self-compassion. And to me, some of the early research showing that they could be beneficial for things like sleep, which is really, really important, when you're living with a chronic health condition, because if your sleep is messed up, on top of everything else, it's going to amplify. We know that sleep and stress and pain, they have this sort of, circular relationship, so that if you throw one off, then it's going to make you more susceptible to stress. And if you're more susceptible and reactive to stress, that means it's going to amplify your experience of pain, right? So,
and it's a vicious cycle because, and then if you're not you're not sleeping, and then you can't sleep because of the pain possibly. And then, it can be a vicious cycle for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So, so it's kind of, just got interested in some of that research that was showing that things like gratitude, for example, could improve people's sleep quality, especially if they practice it before they went to bed. And then one of the reasons was that, it would reduce these sort of negative, what they call pre-sleep cognitions, right? Because if you go to bed and you're worrying about stuff that, in the day and, how did that go? And, oh, I didn't get to do this and all, then that disrupts your sleep patterns. And it just sort of, feeds on spiral. It does this downward spiral that can be really damaging. Right. So I think that's what caught my interest initially. And so I started, researching on that and other areas too, like I said, with self-compassion.
Yeah, she's got a brand new book out. I want to, I was listening to it to and from my long trip to New York City yesterday. Do It Now, Overcoming Procrastination. Her recent research is on procrastination, which I think I could do another 7 hours on that. I would love to get to that too, because you've done research with people with chronic pain and procrastination too, as well, correct?
Yeah, I've looked at chronic health conditions like for heart health, cardiovascular disease, and that, in relation to. And I've got some unpublished work I haven't done looking at people with fibromyalgia and procrastination and how that affected their coping. Yeah.
Oh gosh, I want to talk about that. But how would you define gratitude?
So I default to sort of the researcher's definition, which I think is a really good one. And there's sort of two parts to gratitude. So the first is, you can think of gratitude obviously as a state, as an emotional experience, but I think also I like to think of it as an orientation, right? Whether it's a momentary orientation or an enduring orientation. So we can think of it as an orientation towards first noticing and then appreciating the positive in life. So there's two steps to gratitude. You have to first notice the positives. Right. The appreciation doesn't happen unless you notice those positives first. And I think that's one of those steps that we often forget about. We think about, practice and cultivate gratitude, but you've got to have something to be grateful for. You've got to be able to have something that you can identify that is, that either it's something that somebody's done for you or just something positive, like a nice sunset, or if you like full moons, we had a beautiful full moon a couple of nights ago, something like that, that just makes you go, wow, like it's that sense of awe and wonder that, there's some wonderful, beautiful things in the world,
And a willingness to notice too, right? You have to be, because, two people can see that same moon, right? And
well, yeah. Or two people can have, somebody do something nice for you. And there's some real differences between someone who's got a grateful mindset and someone who has an ungrateful mindset. So, it's interesting when you think about it. And again, this comes down to that whole idea of perspective, right? So the example I like to give is like, say somebody, let's say you've got to get to the airport. Okay. And you don't have a car and you've not been able to get bus tickets and that. And, you're kind of, stuck there. Actually, I've just lost my train of thought on that example.
That's okay. That's all right.
I'm going to default to just another basic example. Somebody does something nice for you, like somebody brings in some baking or something, to the office, as people are going back to the office now these days.
Yeah.
A grateful person would see that as the giver doing something that was costly to them. So it took them time to bake those things. They were giving them altruistically. They're not asking money for the baking. They're not expecting a return favor for it, right? And it's something that would benefit you. So you would say, oh, I love baking fresh baked goods, right? So those are the three ingredients that have to kind of be there for someone to recognize and act as being, something that to be grateful for or positive. Somebody with an ungrateful mindset would instead look at the giver or, the person who's doing the altruistic act as it not being altruistic, as being conditional, where they're doing that because they want something, right?
Yeah.
They're bringing in baked goods because they want a favor from me, right?
Right.
And then they might say, oh, well, they do baking all the time. It's no skin off their back to do it. So they wouldn't see it as being costly to the person that was baking. And they might also go, you know what? I'm not terribly big on baked goods. I could take them or leave them. So it's not really that valuable to me. So you see, that's the stark difference between an ungrateful and a grateful mindset. It's the same act. Someone's brought something in, but depending on how you view that and view that giver, that actually will determine whether you experience that feeling of gratitude.
So if somebody doesn't, oh, look, my guardian angel's here. There she is. So cool. I love our story. Hey, Deborah, thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. I love you too. That's like one of those beautiful moments that restored my faith in humanity. That is for sure. And somebody's just down the road from Sheffield.
Wow. Oh, that's
very, very exciting. So if you don't have a grateful mindset, if somebody doesn't have a grateful mindset, can they develop a grateful mindset?
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things I has really kept me interested in researching this area, is that it's something you can change. Like you can actually shift people's thinking, and it's, through practice. But some of the research that's been going on too, looking at sort of the brain regions that are activated when people experience gratitude, suggests that it changes your brain too. So it's not just a practice. There's actually a mind-body relationship there that's happening. And I think that's where we start seeing also some of the, the physical health benefits of gratitude as well. So absolutely, it can be cultivated. But it is, it's a habit. You have to practice it, because you've got to start, obviously if you're cynical, that's going to get in the way of being grateful. Right?
I get that a lot when I tell people about the group. We were talking before the broadcast. I was telling you, for some reason we're 98% women. I don't know why. I'd love to have more men in the group. I don't know if they don't believe in gratitude. I'm not really sure, but my group's not for everybody. I think a lot of people think that, by practicing gratitude, you're ignoring the problem. No. And that's not what we're doing. We're trying to live a joyful life despite, not with the problem, the problem.
Yeah. It's putting in balance, I mean, it's what you bring into your perspective. Right. And, so obviously to be cynical about gratitude, but even just cynical about people. Like if you're mistrustful and cynical about life and about people. People could be doing kind things all the time, but you're
Yep.
not going to notice them. So you're
I know.
robbing yourself of those opportunities to actually experience gratitude.
Yep.
And, I've been looking into some other theories lately about gratitude, and some really, we often think about when we do something for somebody, right? Or we're on the receiving end of a grateful act. The first inclination is to want to repay that person if we're experiencing gratitude. It's like, oh, thank you so much, but not just the thank you, but it's like, if we have an opportunity to do something in return, we want to reciprocate, right?
Right.
And what's really interesting is that some of the studies that have evoked states of gratitude and looked at also people who have a more enduring, grateful mindset have shown that the parts of the brain that have to do with altruism and also forward thinking are activated when we're experiencing gratitude. And because what happens when somebody does something for you is you're thinking next, well, what can I do next? You're thinking ahead about how you can repay them. But the other thing that's really fascinating about gratitude too is it's not just paying back to that person. That's kind of what we call reciprocal altruism. But there's another type of gratitude. It's like a pay it forward type of altruism. So if somebody does something nice to you, you feel, well, it's like experience of kindness, right? So you get that feeling of gratitude. And maybe you don't have the opportunity to pay it back to the person that did it. Okay, maybe it was a stranger, or maybe whatever you would do wouldn't be that valued to them. So, you really want to do something that's sort of equal to what you've experienced. So what happens, and what's been shown in some of the research on this, is that people will then want to pay it forward and do kind acts for other people. So it actually begets sort of a flow of kindness to others when we experience gratitude. And that's so, again, another reason to not rob yourself of the benefits of gratitude, but also it prompts you to want to give more to other people as well.
And doing service is something that I like to promote too. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to work for hours in a soup kitchen. You can do service in so many different ways, even on with limited abilities, even just saying kind words on Facebook, or answering a call from a crazy person on Spot Hero. You can, like, just a couple words can make somebody's day, and it makes you feel good. It makes us feel good. There's doing good things for people. Well, it helps us get out of our own head too, doesn't it? Because with chronic illness, we spend a lot of time in our own head. And that's where I think community helps too, developing a community and talking to others, because we can feel that whole uniqueness, that I'm alone in my feelings. Nobody else feels this way. And then you can join a community and be like, oh, well, a lot of people feel this way, it can be a danger. For me personally, isolating led me down a dark path, and eventually alcoholism, and, hit a rock bottom. And thankfully I got a second chance at life, which is why I like to kind of pay it forward. But, what do you think that, there's a lot of talk now these days about gratitude. We talked a little bit about before the episode, gratitude and toxic positivity. What do you think the difference is?
Yeah, it's a great question. I know. And I think people's knee-jerk reaction to any of these positive constructs like gratitude and optimism and self-compassion is it's all very one-sided. So that the toxic positivity sort of view is that you only see the positive and you ignore all the negative stuff, and you just sort of be this Pollyannish, everything's just going to be wonderful, and don't worry about that. And that toxic positivity, rightly so, can be harmful, because it is about sort of denying some of the harder issues that people might be experiencing, especially in the context of, of chronic health conditions. It's kind of like saying, well, that doesn't matter. Right.
Right.
And that's not the case with gratitude. So gratitude, like, you were hinting at it earlier, it's not about just walking around, oh, I'm grateful for everything. It's, you're recognizing that, hey, I've got difficult circumstances, and there's some days I'm going to have a harder time, than others, but you're not ignoring those stressors. You're not putting it out and saying it doesn't exist.
Right.
What you're trying to do with gratitude is you're trying to find something positive, so that you can balance out that. So you're not preoccupied with the negative. It's kind of like rebalancing the scales, right? And, it can be harder in different contexts. I mean, some of the research we've done, we did a study looking at people with fibromyalgia, and then we compared their levels of gratitude. And again, this is sort of more of like a trait or an enduring tendency with a healthy sample that had no chronic health conditions. And not surprisingly, the people with fibromyalgia had lower mean levels of this enduring type of gratitude. It doesn't mean they weren't grateful. It just means relative to someone who wasn't dealing with as many stressors and pain as they were, that, they had to struggle more to find things to be grateful for, right? And I think that's a realistic view. Yeah. And that, so I think I always bring that in when, people say, oh, it's all positivity. It's like, no, it's not. But what we did find in that study too, is that, even in that context of living, through a very painful condition of fibromyalgia, those who had adopted more of a grateful mindset also experienced better mental health and better physical health and overall better quality of life.
Yeah, it's not easy for sure, but all the studies, and I'm sure most of them are yours, show that you can actually sort of rewire your brain, right? You can. The more you practice gratitude, the easier it is to come to a place of gratitude, right? Because aren't we wired for the negative? Am I saying that? That's
Well, yeah. I mean, we're kind of wired for detecting threats,
fight or flight, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that there's this whole a lot of the positive psych and it's even just positive emotions is to counter that. Like so there is a purpose for these positive emotions, right? So positive emotions help downregulate that fight or flight response. They help put things back into balance. And so gratitude is part of that. It's one of these positive emotions, again, that helps you kind of, not get consumed by that, sort of focus on the negativity and the stress, right? And obviously, again, chronic health conditions is like living with a chronic stressor. Yeah. So you do need to find things to balance it out. And gratitude is one way that can help bring that balance in.
We actually had somebody in the group just last week. It was a newer member, and they just came out and flat out asked, can gratitude, I don't know if she used the word cure, but can gratitude really help chronic pain, I think. And the thread was so long, some people were, it took all I had to not like throw every study out there. But what would be your answer to that question? Can gratitude really help people living with chronic pain?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And again, the scientific reasons behind this have to do with the relationship between the body and mind in the experience of pain. Pain is not a physical experience wholly. It involves physical, but it is not 100% physical experience. It is a psychophysiological experience, right? And so some of the classic models like the pain gate theory, suggests that when we're in certain states, especially negative states, those negative states actually amplify the neural signals running through the spine and, that transmit the pain to the brain, and they open up the floodgate. So they can actually, when you're in a negative state, you actually can feel more intense pain. And when you're in a positive state, those pain gates narrow down and even shut down. Right. So it doesn't mean the pain isn't there, but you may recognize it as something different. You might see it as discomfort instead of intense burning pain. Right. So it's not going to make the pain go away, but it's going to change your relationship to the pain. And also potentially too, change the intensity of the pain.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one thing we know for sure, though, is that if you stress and worry or in a negative state about the pain, you're absolutely guaranteed to experience it in a more intense and unpleasant manner.
It's true. Yeah, I've been sick for 20 years, and you've spent a lot of time trying to find a pattern. And you and I talked about this before the broadcast. Like, did I eat something? And that's a whole other issue I want to talk to you about after this. I want to talk to you about like the guilt that we put on ourselves, but like, what did I eat? Did I sleep yesterday? Blah, blah, blah. And, gosh, now I lost my train of thought. Where was I going with that?
Yeah, we're talking about like the self-blame sort of side of it. And
I know what I was going to say. Like trying to find a pattern as to what the only thing I've found for me in 20 years that I know will cause a flare is stress. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And that is pretty much across the board, especially for conditions where there's an inflammatory basis. That is definitely stress can make things worse. And you see this across a number of different conditions, especially pain conditions. And stress is a negative state as well. So it operates. So, what I was just talking about was our perception of pain. So perception of pain changes when, you're in a more of a negative state of mind, and certainly when you're stressed. Other things happen though when you're stressed. So again, stress is a psychophysiological process. It initiates a whole cascade of biobehavioral events, in the body, and even our reactions and the way, we relate to the world. And so when we're stressed, we're going to do things differently. We're not going to look after our health as much. We're probably going to eat the foods that are going to be more harmful to us as well.
Yep.
And it actually amplifies inflammatory processes, right? Which again are involved in many chronic health conditions, but also involved in some of the pains and flares.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. So that's just basic science, that if you're stressed, it's going to have an immediate translation on your body. That's not the same though as saying that you cause the illness or that you're causing the pain. We're as human beings, we're sensitive to our environments and what goes on. I mean, it would be ridiculous to expect somebody to not experience stress, especially if they're going through difficult times,
right?
Or there's major changes in their life. So I don't want to be sounding like we're people are to blame for the stress and they have to cut out all stress.
Yeah.
No, we all experience stress. I think what we can do best though is try and manage that stress. And for our own quality of life, right? So if you manage that stress and find ways that work for you, you help yourself. But saying that is not the same as saying you're causing the flare, right? Or you're causing the pain. That's part of the condition. That's part and parcel. And it's not like you can do things and all of a sudden, boom, I have no more flares. Boom, I have no more pain. Oh, the disease is gone. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah. And I'm not unique. I know in that when you're sick, you get people telling you all the time, I can help you with these supplements. I can help you with this, that, and the other thing. And then we try them because we want to feel less pain. And, for me, at least, I can only speak from my own experience, but with each thing that was failed, I considered myself a failure, and I retreated deeper and deeper into my head, my depression, down that dark path I was in. So, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Like there's a fine line between like having an obsession with curing myself versus coming to a place of acceptance and still doing things to help myself. But I want to live the best life I can possibly live with the time I have left. And hopefully it's a lot of time. So how can I do that? I don't have control over a lot. I found that out the hard way.
Yeah. See, that's the issue. It's exactly what you're describing there. And this is where some of my initial research as a postgraduate student was to look at how do we measure control in people who don't have a lot of control, such as those living with chronic health conditions. And, the existing measures at that time equated having control with curing the disease. So they had, questions that you'd have to rate, right? Whether you agree, strongly disagree or strongly agree. And this would tell you how much control somebody had over their health. But they were designed for perfectly healthy people who didn't have chronic pain or chronic health conditions. So you'd have a question like, if I do the right things, I can stay healthy.
Right.
So how do you answer that when you've got a chronic health condition, right?
Yeah.
If you say yes, then you're admitting to the fact that, oh, I caused this. I didn't do the right things. Therefore, I have a disease.
Right.
No. So, I won't get into all the...
And some doctors don't help that matter. Some doctors don't help that either. When I was trying to get diagnosed for years, I was told, you're depressed. Well, I'm depressed because I don't feel good. Can you tell me what's wrong with me? Some doctors really don't help the matters. They, especially like fibromyalgia. I don't mean to talk about too specifics, but fibromyalgia, a lot of doctors don't even think it's a real thing.
Yeah.
And I know I have a lot of group members that have fibromyalgia. I have it myself. They just don't think it's a real thing. But I've heard you mention it. You think it's a real thing.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think it's different in different countries too. In some places it is considered under your raumatological disease. It's classified as a form of arthritis. It is.
But in America, it's not rheumatological, right? Am I right about that? Or is it?
I don't know. I mean, I think I've seen a lot of variation on this. I don't think there's a uniform view on it. I mean, I'm Canadian originally.
I can hear it in your accent. Yeah.
So, I think in Canada, there's a more of a liberal view of it. And certainly from the Canadian Arthritis Society's perspective, fibromyalgia comes under their umbrella. And that's just kind of how I've always viewed it as well, too.
And then you feel like, is this all in my head?
Well, yeah, and
it's so difficult.
But that's going back to this whole control thing again.
Yeah.
And I think, you sort of touched on it there about, how much control do I have? You said there was a fine line. Well, the fine line is between the perception of control. We have to admit that there's some things we can control and some things we can't. Because if you take control too far, it becomes self-blame.
Yeah, right.
That's how it's like when everyone thinks, have a high sense of control, it's great. Not in the context of chronic health condition. So it's like going back to the item. If I do the right things, I can stay healthy.
Yeah.
That's implying extreme control over your health, which we do not have. None of us have this. So I agree with you, what you're saying about this idea of acceptance. That's the first thing you have to do. You accept, I have this disease. I didn't bring it on.
Yeah.
I just have it. Bad genes, whatever else you want to blame it on, not yourself though, right?
Doesn't mean you have to like it.
No, you don't have to like it.
You just have to accept it.
Yeah, accept it is okay. This is what I'm working with. This is my baseline. This is what I'm working with. Okay. And then from there, you say, how can I exercise control within the limits and bounds of this chronic health condition? And I think that's where the acceptance is useful, because you're accepting that there are limits to what you can control. If you don't accept, then you're constantly looking for that cure.
Right.
Because you're assuming that you can control. And if I do the right things, I'll make it. I'll cure myself. I'll make it all go away. It'll all get better.
Right.
And that's not a realistic or healthy, from a psychological perspective, view of things. You need to accept, this is what I've got. It doesn't mean it can't get better.
Right.
Doesn't mean you can't improve it. It's not, here's my lot in life. It's, this is what I'm working with. So how can I make the best of things, and maybe even go beyond what the doctor said I can do within this, this framework.
Right.
And accepting that I have this condition, and there's some days I'm not going to be able to do things I want to, and other days, things are going to seem like I don't have anything wrong with me.
Right. Right. And I find a lot of the times we tend to romanticize the before, how great things were before. We do tend to do that. I'm totally neglecting our audience here. If you have questions, we are talking to Dr. Fuschia Sirois from the University of Sheffield. So excited to have her here today. And did I just block myself out of the broadcast? Hang on.
I know, I still see you.
All right, there I am. I told you that was going to happen. Oh, hang on. I got a new computer recently. I don't know how to use it. Okay, so if you have any questions or comments for her and what she said, I know you guys are going to be in agreement with me. We can talk to her for many hours. The more grateful I am, the more I am grateful for experiences. Totally agree, Seaton. Pamela Creighton says, my rheumatologist diagnoses fibro for me through symptoms. Mine had like 11 pressure points or something like that, I think, when I was eventually diagnosed with fibro. I think that's kind of typical, at least in my area. I've been told I could have fibro, but cannot get seen by rheumatology. GP, I guess. It says no. HP says no point.
It's probably GP. They're next to each other on the keyboard.
Oh, yeah.
That happens to me all the time. I'm always slipping over and hitting the wrong button.
Yeah. And Anne's actually in the UK.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Here she is. GP. She says, yeah. Yeah. So interesting. So in England, you can't get seen by a rheumatologist. It's interesting.
That is interesting.
You haven't found that, I'm not sure if you would even, do you know that?
No, I haven't. I haven't done any.
Oh, and she's down the road from you. This is the one. Anne's the one down the road from you.
Has a Sheffield. Oh, okay. She's down the road from Sheffield and has a Sheffield address.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So who do you see then? GP says no point. I mean, that's a whole other issue, but
I think sometimes you have to just find a GP who will advocate for you then.
Yeah.
Because they come from, it depends on when they were trained. If someone was trained back in the day, you're going to get some resistance, right? Oh, fibro. Isn't that one of those, sort of, what were they calling them? They were calling them MUPs for a while. They were lumping fibro in with chronic fatigue and.
The symptoms are really similar, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah, multiple unidentified physical symptoms.
I think, honestly, my official diagnosis from my rheumatologist is undifferentiated connective tissue disorder, because I've lupus like symptoms as well. Sometimes I think MS, but the symptoms with a lot of these things are so similar. But yeah, I've heard multiple stories from people that have gone to the ER for pain who have fibromyalgia, and they're kind of just told it's not a real thing, and it's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking.
But I mean, all of these, it's only because medicine as well is still learning about these. Like you said, especially when you have overlap between conditions, right?
Yeah.
Like these are just labels,
Right.
right?
They
So
really are. You're right. A lot of times we're striving for that diagnosis, and then we get there and we realize it's just a label. Nothing's really changed, right?
no, it's a label for the medical profession so that they know what is the proper course of action to
Right.
treat,
Right.
right?
Yep.
And that's what it is. It doesn't define you, right? And I think that's another part of the issue. There's a difference between, you were saying, between acceptance and letting the illness or the label of the illness define who you are. It's a collection of symptoms. It may have roots in this particular cause or in inflammation or in something else or a crossover. Regardless of all of that, it really comes down to you, and sort of how you live with it, right? Not and part of it too is also not living with the label, right? And not becoming, sort of, so that you become that label as well.
So her GP's attitude is she's already on the treatment she needs. Yeah. Elizabeth Silver Seaton wants some examples of managing stress. How would you recommend people manage their stress?
Well, again, there's lots of approaches you can use for stress. So mindfulness is all in the rage, but that's harder when you've got chronic pain, right? Because you've got to sit and experience. You do the body scans. And
Yeah.
How, right? Like
I think I was telling you. Well, I wrote you an email. I told you that I do these. I call them breath breaks because sometimes the word meditation scares people off, but always 5 minutes or less. Just it's difficult. I used to run a meeting, and I would try to do 20-minute. Not I didn't run it, but I didn't run the meditation, but I would try to do a pre-recorded one. And people have to get up and walk around and stuff, and that's because of their conditions, it's not really realistic for people.
But I mean, I think you're right. I mean, meditation doesn't have to be formalized. So I mean, the basis of something like mindfulness is really focusing your attention to one thing fully and being fully involved in that, right? And so anything that you do, so we're talking about mindfulness, and it's all formalized, and there's courses you can take. Go back a couple of centuries, people were doing mindful things all the time. They didn't call it mindfulness, right? So if someone's sitting down and weaving wool from a sheep, and taking it and weaving and getting into that, or some other craft, or it's baking, or out working on the farm, or just very basic sort of tasks where you throw yourself into it and you become totally absorbed, right? That's a mindful activity. Right. And so it doesn't have to be a meditative state. And when you're doing that, the pain, nothing else is in your focus. It's just what you're working on. And so that's one way of sort of managing things. But I mean, in terms of managing stress, there's lots of activities. I think the key thing with the stress management is also how you respond to the difficulties you're having. This is one of the other reasons I've gotten interested in self-compassion, because it's about responding to the difficulties you might be having, or the stressors you might be having. So maybe you had great plans for your day, and then you wake up and you've got a flare, and it's just like, that's not going to happen, and you start getting disappointed in yourself and hard on yourself and critical, and that just makes everything worse, right? And creates more stress. So we can generate a lot of stress by our own disappointment of not being able to do the things that we want to do. And so this is where self-compassion can be really helpful, because it's recognizing, it's responding to your failures and your personal shortcomings, right? In a kind, gentle, connected, and mindful manner, right? And so rather than being self-critical, you be gentle and kind to yourself, and you say, you know what? I'm having a bad day today. I wish it was different, but yeah, I'm not going to beat myself up over that. Right. So it's
Right.
not, again, it's not that toxic positivity, like everything's okay.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah. Right.
yeah, I'm having a bad day. I'm not happy about it. Right.
Yeah.
But, I've got a reason that I'm not getting the things done I want to get done. And I shouldn't be hard on myself for that. It's
Right.
also feeling connected. And I think that what they call, this is Kristen Neff's model of self-compassion, and she calls it a common humanity. And the common humanity is really, really important, I think, especially in terms of connecting with others, because, and when we have these difficulties, you can feel like I'm the only person
Right.
that's going through this, right? You feel isolated in your suffering, which is the worst thing you can have.
Yep.
Instead of recognizing, going, you know what? I'm not the first person with chronic pain to be having a bad day and not being able to do what I want to do, right? And I won't be the last. And that also opens the doorway up to reach out to others, to reach out to communities such as yours and talk to others and just say, yeah, I want to connect with and hear what other people are going through to sort of change my perspective on things.
Yeah.
So, that's it. And then the mindfulness side is not becoming entrenched in the negative emotions, right? So we confuse with our negative emotions sometimes. So, they say that emotions only last a few seconds in the brain. And it's our thoughts around that and replaying those experiences that elicited those emotions that actually keep them going. And if we ruminate on them, we can keep going and going and going. And then we become our feelings. We become that anger. We become that disappointment. We can't separate our sense of self from those emotional experiences. And when they're negative, that can be quite damaging. So mindfulness in the context of self-compassion then is being able to step back and say, yeah, I'm feeling crappy about, not being able to do what I was really looking forward to do today. Right.
Right.
But there's other things that I can do as well. So holding it in balance. And one of the things that's really nice about self-compassion is that when you respond that way, instead of, being self-critical, it actually helps you, motivate you to then go on and do better next time around. So there's been tons of studies that shows that when people, face their personal failures and shortcomings with a self-compassionate attitude, they're more motivated to self-improve and to move on. Doesn't make them lazy, doesn't make them complacent. It's not self-indulgent. It's basically something that pushes you to go on and strive the next time around.
And it can be difficult to do. We're so willing to give love to our loved ones, but we're so hard on ourselves. I don't know that that's unique to people living with chronic pain and illness, but something that I've found in the years of running this group and the chats and all of that stuff, I've found that most of us identify as empaths, which is you probably find interesting as a researcher, but most of us that I've come across seem to be very sensitive, very loving, giving people. And I don't know if there's a relationship with chronic pain, but we'll give the shirt off our backs for our best friend, but we're so hard on ourselves.
Yeah.
So I try to work on that for myself and share with the group too.
Yeah. Well, and then, some of the research I'm doing right now, I'm doing research actively on self-compassion. And one of the things I'm really interested in, what are the barriers for people being self-compassionate? And so some of the barriers that have been identified in the research is that people sometimes will struggle with that. Like you said, it's so easy to be compassionate to people, but very hard for ourselves. And there's a lot of different reasons for this. Sometimes it's because people don't know what being compassionate means. Sometimes they think being compassionate themselves will make them soft and not try and give up. Right.
We can look at it as selfish.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's
Yeah.
been research showing exactly that, but other times they can also feel that they don't deserve compassion.
Good point.
Right. And so this goes back to the whole self-blame thing again. If you're taking too much, saying that you've got too much, or thinking you've got too much control, over your condition and your flares, which is that sort of very self-blaming, then that can be connected to, well, I've got this because I deserve it. Or I've got this and I don't deserve compassion. So, it can sometimes those sorts of thoughts can run really deep too, and may not always be obvious to, but that can also be a sort of signal when someone's having difficulty being self-compassionate. They don't feel they deserve it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up. I've found that a lot, that people don't feel worthy of that kind of self-compassion. And I think as a community, we work on it together because we know we know the right answers. We know we're supposed to be more self-compassionate. We don't necessarily do it, but the more we encourage each other to do it, I think it gets a little bit easier.
Yeah. And some of that non-deservingness can come with, some of the thoughts that people commonly experience when you're living a chronic health condition. You can feel like you're letting other people down.
Another
right?
excellent point. Thank you for
You
bringing
know,
that up. We do.
You feel like you're letting people down. So if you're letting people down, you're not pulling your end in the family, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, right? Then you don't deserve compassion.
That is
supposed to, right?
Yeah, we say that all the time. That's excellent. Yeah.
Yeah. So then you can think, well, I don't deserve compassion because I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So, that could be another source of that in the context of,
or I should be able to do this, or I used to be able to do this.
Yeah. That's a kind of, kind of a perfectionistic thinking though, too. And that can be really, really harmful in the context of chronic health conditions, that comparing to, that sort of, that former self, past you who was pain-free. And, you hold that up as sort of on a pedestal as that's what you should be. And then you're constantly striving to sort of become that person again, which is impossible, right? I mean, even without a chronic health condition,
we still get older.
We get older.
Right.
Things hurt a lot more. We have limitations in terms of what we can do.
Right.
So it's just not a natural paradigm, anyways, to view ourselves. But when you do that, and then you start having these sort of almost perfectionistic views that, well, I should be, right? That tyranny of the shoulds. I should be doing this. I should be able to do that. And that can be quite harmful as well.
Yeah. So we resent ourselves, for not being able to. And that's, I was telling you, we do daily intentions in the group rather than goals. I call it like a very loose roadmap to kind of give us purpose for the day in pencil, just like a little guide. But if, setting a goal and 5 minutes later, you're in pain, you can't make it, then we can resent ourselves. That's a dangerous path to go down. Fran Sullivan says, thank you for getting how challenging it can be. I don't want to beat myself up by thinking I'm not doing it correctly. Yeah.
And then that's the self-compassion that comes in. You just got to accept. And I think this is where the more you talk to other people and see that they're struggling with the same things, you realize, hey, this is normal. It's okay. It's okay to have bad days. It's okay to, cancel appointments or, not being able to follow through with commitments because of, your illness or your pain gets in the way. Right.
Right.
Like that's just part and parcel for the course.
Yeah.
Right. And that's part of the self-acceptance. So self-acceptance is a really core part of self-compassion there too.
Tell me about that, about self-acceptance. You mean accepting the condition?
Well, it's accepting yourself, accepting your flaws, right? So I think what can happen a lot of times too is you might blame the flaws on the condition though too. And sometimes, I mean, we all have personality flaws. We all have things about ourselves we don't like. Some of it is tied to the condition. And I think I think it could be problematic when you start, blaming it on your pain or blaming it on your condition.
Yeah.
Because
good point.
The flip side of that, there's been a ton of research that's shown that people actually can thrive and grow and become better people as a result of, their chronic health conditions. So if you're only seeing the negative and you're seeing, well, this has happened and it's because of this illness and I'm not doing well. What about what you've gained as a person? What about how you've grown, how it's changed you? Maybe you become more empathetic, maybe you've started, because you're living within limitations, you've had an opportunity to slow down and learn more about yourself and what you really enjoy and what you really like. I mean, it's different for everybody, right?
Right.
But that's the positive side of going through these difficult experiences. And then when you throw the gratitude into that too, that can kind of amplify things a bit because you start looking, you start saying, you know what, I am really grateful. Even as much as I don't like this condition, I'm really grateful for what it's taught me. I'm really grateful for the people it's brought into my life. I'm really grateful for the things that I've learned about myself or, the directions that it's taking me. You see, that's a very different perspective rather than, just seeing it as, right, I've got to, I don't accept myself because I can't do these things anymore. I become this other person, right? It's accepting self is accepting illness.
A lot of people, I don't know that I want to say they thrive on their illness because that's a horrible accusation, but you kind of touched on it. You said they kind of they use their illness to say, well, I can't do that because I'm sick. I can't do this because I'm sick. And it becomes like almost like a knee-jerk reaction without thinking that they could possibly do something. And I know I was like that. So speaking from my personal experience, I would just say, well, no, of course I can't do that because, but getting outside of our comfort zone a little bit can be helpful.
That is a tricky part of acceptance. And I think it is a really hard thing to navigate because it isn't giving up. It isn't saying, I can't do this anymore. Right. I think it has to be with, basically it's your sense of self. Right. So if your sense of self is illness here and me down here, then that's going to happen more, where you're going to, see those limits and not being able to adjust and feel sort of trapped under that definition of whatever that illness is. And there's actually been some really interesting research lately that actually tested that, the degree to which people identified with that label and saw their identity is tied up with their illness, actually had poor quality of life and struggled more than those who just saw it as like, no, this is me. And, I'm a mother and I'm an athlete and I'm a plant enthusiast and I'm a baker and I'm, this person. Oh, and I've got this, chronic health condition.
Interesting.
So it's a part of the overall identity of who you are. It doesn't take over your identity.
Right. That's so interesting. I didn't know there were studies on that. That is very interesting. And I think that's what we strive for in attitude of gratitude with chronic pain. It's like, we know we have this. We're not allowed to talk about our conditions in the group. That's one of our guidelines because we don't want to compare. We just say, it's like an umbrella statement. We're in pain. We don't like it. How can we live happy, joyful, fulfilling lives? Where do we go from here? Now what? That's what, but we do offer live chats twice a week where people can talk about whatever they want and share, freely. But,
well, and that's great because what you're doing there is you're supporting people to get into a more complete sense of their identity. They're not their illness.
Yeah.
Right. Because if you talk too much and you start comparing, then you start reinforcing that label and that sense of illness identity. And you don't want a strong illness identity. You want a strong identity where the illness is part of that identity, but not a strong illness identity where it's front and center of who you are, because that actually can be quite harmful.
Right. Or we can compare it the other way too. You could say, well, gosh, I really shouldn't be complaining because this one's got, so much worse than me. Yeah. That kind of invalidates your pain, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Those are we called social comparisons. So those downward social comparisons, a lot of the research that was done on that about 20 years ago with cancer patients. And what they found was, in some instances, so in the context of, life-threatening illness and, people got diagnosed with different cancers. I think the study was done with women with breast cancer. And in the short run, what they found was that the women who were struggling initially, who then were looking at others who had a much worse prognosis than them, actually started to feel a bit better. It didn't invalidate them so much as it gave them the motivation to keep trying to get better, right? So they didn't feel sorry for themselves. So in small doses, that can work. But I agree, if you're doing too much of that and you're really in a bad place and someone's much worse off than you, it can be invalidating. So there's a fine line with when that's done and how much it's done in the context.
We have a really important question. My mom.
Hey, Teals. I sent her the link, so she's here.
Adjust your headphones if you actually see my comments, she said. There you go. Hi, Tila. Your mom's awesome.
Adjust it there.
We only have a couple minutes. I knew it was going to go fast. Ann Bean says, letting people down so resonates with my low mood today. Had to fight it, but now coming out the other side.
Oh, that's
good news. There's so many comments, guys. I'm sorry I can't get to them all. Heidi Presser says, I was upset earlier today. I went for a walk, but I was still ruminating. I finally stopped when I told myself, focus on my surroundings, birds singing, gentle breeze, cooling me, etc. Awesome, Heidi.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's what you put your attention to. It doesn't mean you ignore the difficulties you're having, but if you're struggling, and you need that relief, you can shift your attention to something that will put a smile on your face, and something that will elicit those feelings of gratefulness for nature or other people in your life or what have you.
It's just so validating to talk to a scientist, researcher, doctor who talks about these things. Even though I know they're real, it's just so validating to hear you speak and to hear your work and your research and all that. It really is just to know that we're on the right track, because it's not an easy, I mean, nobody has an easy life. Life is hard. Life is difficult for everybody. We all struggle with one thing or another, but hearing these things from you is just so incredible. Self-compassion can be viewed as selfish as well as attention seeking or being a martyr. Yeah.
But that's not really self-compassion then. So we get that is, and it is, you're right. There were studies done. There was a really cool study that was done, and they got people and they divided them on their scores of self-compassion. So they had the people with high self-compassion and the people with low self-compassion. And then they asked them, they said, imagine yourself to be a self-compassionate person. Now, here's a list of attributes and traits and qualities. How would you rate yourself if you were to imagine yourself as being self-compassionate? So the people who were self-compassionate, they said, ambitious, thoughtful, productive, energetic, altruistic, all kinds of positive qualities. The people who were low in self-compassion, you know how they rated themselves if they had to be self-compassionate? Lazy, self-indulgent, unambitious, selfish, right? And so this is exactly it. If you aren't naturally self-compassionate, it can be hard to understand what it is, right? But it isn't about any of those things at all.
Yeah.
The negative traits, it is about being kind to yourself. And I think we think about like you said, how you would treat a friend. And that's one of the exercises you can do. If you're struggling, you write a letter to a friend who might be struggling with the issue you're struggling with. So, your friend's having a flare and is not able to follow through with their commitments and is having a hard time. Would you say to them, what's wrong with you? How could you let those people down? What's going on? No, you would never say that to a friend. You'd be kind, you'd be gentle, and you'd say, hey, it's okay. You're just having a bad day today, and they'll understand. And you know what? Everybody's, this happens to everybody once in a while. You're not the only person who's experienced this, and, try not to get too caught up on it. And, I'm here for you kind of thing. But we don't have that's not the inner dialogue we have with ourselves when we're going through those experiences. And so you have to practice changing that inner dialogue from one that's self-critical and negative to one that's more compassionate and gentle and understanding. And it's not giving a pass on yourself, especially if it's, in context where maybe it's not the pain, but you did something else where you screwed up something and you feel really bad about it. It's okay to feel bad about screwing up. We all screw up. But I think that's part of the self-compassionate mindset, is recognizing that we all suffer and we're all imperfect and we all make mistakes.
Right.
And that's just what being human is, right?
Yeah.
And once you accept that, then you kind of go, and that's why I feel bad about it. But that's also why I want to improve things and do better next time.
Yeah. I keep trying to catch myself, saying, negative language to myself. If I drop something, oh, you idiot, and
that negative, script, right?
I don't really think I'm an idiot, but
no, but
I still say it.
Yeah. And we pick these things up, when in childhood, maybe it was somebody at school, maybe it was a teacher, maybe it was a parent or sibling or something. And we adopt this inner dialogue and we don't even recognize it. And, then the first step to developing that self-compassionate mindset is actually recognizing that you've got that inner negative dialogue going, because you have to say, oh, right, that's what I'm saying. I wouldn't say that to a friend. Okay, what would I say? Right? Before you can change that script into something more positive and supportive.
So it's kind of a practice, like gratitude is a practice. We need a self-compassion practice too, you're saying.
Yeah. And I think, it's different things with the self-compassion that you do. I find in many ways the gratitude practice is a bit more straightforward. Because these simple exercises that you do, like the 3 good things, right?
Yeah.
Right. Where you say, what 3 good things, happened today, or what am I grateful for, or keeping a gratitude journal.
Yeah.
That's a very simple thing, but what you're doing is you're retraining, you're rewiring your mind almost, in a sense, to start noticing, right? Because to be able to write those things, you have to notice. It makes you think, oh,
right.
what positive things did happen today. Okay. And sometimes it's hard to struggle to do that, but it's also really good to do that sort of practice. If you are struggling, surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, because gratitude is what we call social emotion, doing that in the presence of other people can be really helpful.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Did not know that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, just one of the practices that, I heard about and that they were doing, I think they were trying to cultivate gratitude in school-aged children living in deprived areas. And this was research done in the States. And, they would get them, going home around the dinner table, right? And just saying, almost passing a stick around. Okay, what 3 good things happened to you today, sort of thing, right?
Right.
And they would, the children start it, and they get really into it. And they kind of get the parents on board. So I actually started doing this with our family, and my youngest, she really picked it up, and she was like, we'd be like grumpy and sitting there, and she's like, okay, come on, 3 good things, 3 good things. Okay, I'll go first. And, and then you hear her saying, and it's like, then you kind of think, actually, yeah, there was some good things going on today.
Yeah.
So doing it in the presence of others can certainly help that. And we've done this on a larger scale too. In Sheffield, a couple of years back, we had, they have this thing called the Festival of the Mind, where it's really cool, where you sort of, bridging in science and art and everything. And so we created this installation called the Sheffield International Wall of Gratitude.
I read a little something about that. What is it?
Yeah, so it was in this the Millennium Gallery. We just had this huge wall, and we had it all taped off, and we had these cards where it was like the shape of a brick, about the size of a brick, and basically had on them, 3 good things. What 3 good things, can you think about today, sort of thing, right? And we had them in different languages too, because we wanted to sort of be, inclusive of people where English wasn't their first language. And I remember we had the whole wall set up, and it was set up for like 3 days, and we had like a podium with all the cards there and everything. And we had to put a couple of cards up on the wall ourselves to get things started. And people would wander into the installation, and they kind of look in the wall, and we say, oh, you can go over and do it. And they'd be like, yeah, okay. And then they'd go up to the wall, and they'd read a couple of things people said. And you could see them smile, and you could see them go, oh, yeah, okay, yeah. And next thing you know, they'd wander over to the podium, they'd write their own 3 things up.
Oh, neat.
Yeah. And so by the end of the first day, the wall was full. We had to start taking cards off so we'd have room for the next couple of days and curating it. Awesome. But the same thing happened over and over again. People would read and hear about the other things that people were grateful for, and it would inspire them to then notice and appreciate the positive.
Gratitude is contagious.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. That is fantastic. I could talk to you forever, and I know it's at the hour, and I know it's late where you are. So Dr. Fuschia Sirois, I gave the wrong email address earlier, but I will put this in the comments of the, I know it's a little bit of a hard one to hear, but I will put the link in the comments. You guys can reach her and find out all about her research. You have to read the stuff she's doing on procrastination is crazy interesting too. I would love to have you back sometime. Thank you so much for being here. You've been incredibly helpful.
Well, thanks for having me, and I'm happy to come back anytime.
I will definitely take you up on it. You're going to be sorry that you said that. Okay. So thank you so much for being here. Guys, thank you. I apologize if I didn't get to your comments live, but thank you everybody who contributed live, and I will see you next week. Peace and love, gang. Bye.
Bye.